Montana Territory, 1872. The settlement of Eagles Crossing stood like a stubborn promise against the untamed wilderness. The late autumn winds carried dust through its single, rugged street, whispering secrets of coming winter to those wise enough to listen. Among them was Isaiah Jackson, the town's blacksmith, who believed the frontier had but one truth worth knowing. A man who depends on others invites only disappointment and grief. At 25, Isaiah had the strength of the mountains in his shoulders and hands calloused from shaping metal to his will. Tall and broad-shouldered, his handsome features remained unmarred by the hardness that characterized most frontier men. His clean-shaven face and clear blue eyes belied the weight he carried. The memory of his family's wagon train massacre 5 years prior had taught him a brutal lesson. In a land where death came swift and merciless, attachment meant vulnerability. Better to forge tools than bonds, to shape iron rather than relationships. Isaiah wiped sweat from his brow as he hammered a horseshoe into shape, the rhythm of his work the only companion he permitted himself. The townsfolk respected his skill and his silence in equal measure. They brought him their broken implements and limping horses, and he fixed what needed fixing without entangling himself in their lives. He had built his smithy at the edge of town precisely to maintain this distance. The frontier strips away pretense, his father had once said. Out here, a man knows what matters, survival. Isaiah had taken this lesson to heart, though sometimes in the quiet evenings, watching sparks rise from his forge like fleeting stars, an emptiness gnawed at him that no amount of honest work could fill. What he needed was the very thing he feared most, connection. But admitting that would mean acknowledging that his careful isolation was slowly hollowing him out, leaving behind a shell of a man who could shape metal but had forgotten how to shape joy. The air changed one crisp October morning when the usual sounds of Eagles Crossing were shattered by approaching hoofbeats, too many and too fast for ordinary travelers. Isaiah stepped from his smithy, squinting against the low sun as a horse-drawn wagon careened into town, pursued by 4 riders. "Help, please." A woman's voice, clear and desperate, cut through the morning quiet. Without thought, Isaiah grabbed the rifle he kept beside his door. The wagon swerved dangerously, its single occupant, a young woman in a dust-covered blue dress, struggling to control the panicked horses. Behind her, the riders closed in, bandanas pulled over their faces. In one fluid motion, Isaiah stepped into the street and raised his rifle. The first shot cracked through the air, striking the ground before the lead pursuer. The second found the hat of another, sending it spinning. "The next one finds flesh," he shouted, his voice carrying the certainty of his aim. The bandits pulled up short, exchanging glances before the leader spat. "This ain't over." They wheeled their horses around and retreated, but not before one fired a parting shot that splintered wood beside Isaiah's head. The woman finally managed to halt her wagon near the smithy. As Isaiah approached, he saw she couldn't be more than 20 years old. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins, framing a face pale with fear but possessed of a striking beauty that momentarily unsettled him. Her deep brown eyes met his, filled with such naked relief and gratitude that Isaiah felt an uncomfortable warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you," she breathed, her hands still gripping the reins so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "I thought they would," her voice broke. "You're safe now," Isaiah said, more gruffly than he'd intended. "Those are Becker's boys. They won't come back today." "I'm Hope Callahan," she said, her composure returning as she gathered her scattered dignity. "My husband died 3 months ago. I was bringing our belongings to my sister in Eagles Crossing when those men—" She gestured toward the horizon. Isaiah nodded stiffly. "Isaiah Jackson, town blacksmith." He glanced at her wagon wheel, noticing the dangerous tilt. "Your axle's cracked. I can fix it." As he helped her down from the wagon, he noticed a small face peering out from beneath blankets in the back. A boy of perhaps 4 years, with his mother's eyes and a thumb firmly in his mouth. "That's my son, William," Hope explained softly. "My husband left us with little but debts. My sister, Martha, wrote that I could make a new start here." Isaiah's carefully constructed defenses wavered at the sight of the child's frightened eyes. A widow and her son, alone on the frontier, exactly the kind of entanglement he'd vowed to avoid. Yet something in her steady gaze challenged his long-held belief that isolation was the only safe harbor in this harsh land. "Martha Crawford is your sister?" he asked, surprised. "She owns the general store." Hope nodded, a smile breaking through her worry. "Yes, she's all the family we have now." Isaiah found himself helping unload their essential belongings before starting on the wagon repair. As he worked, he caught himself watching Hope comfort her son, her gentle words gradually coaxing smiles from the boy despite their ordeal. "Why were Becker's men after you?" he finally asked as he measured the damaged axle. Hope's face darkened. "They said the land my husband claimed belongs to their boss. James died digging our well. They claim that means the property reverts to Becker." Her chin lifted in defiance. "I have the deed papers with me. It's all legal." Isaiah's stomach tightened. Conrad Becker was the territory's most notorious land grabber, using threats and violence where money failed. That Hope had stood her ground spoke to a courage that made him reassess the fragile-looking widow. "Becker doesn't care about legal," he warned. "He wants the valley water rights." "I won't be bullied off land that was meant for my son's future," she said with quiet determination. "I just need to reach Martha's safely." That night, unable to sleep, Isaiah sat before his forge. The widow's words echoed in his mind, stirring uncomfortable questions. What future was he building? His forge would eventually grow cold, his skills would die with him, and what would remain of Isaiah Jackson? Nothing but metal artifacts that would rust away with no one to remember the hands that shaped them. The next morning, he found Hope and William at the general store, reunited with her sister. Against his better judgment, Isaiah approached with an offer to escort them to the land office to verify her deed. The smile Hope gave him in return created a peculiar tightness in his chest that no amount of frontier wisdom could explain away. At the land office, they discovered Becker had already filed a counterclaim. The aging clerk, Walter Simmons, shook his head sympathetically. "It's your word against his, Mrs. Callahan. Without your husband to testify to improving the land." "I have the deed," Hope insisted, her voice steady despite the tears threatening in her eyes. "And I'll work that land myself if I have to." Isaiah found himself speaking before he'd fully formed the thought. "She won't be alone. I'll help her establish her claim." Hope's startled gaze met his, gratitude and something warmer mingling in her expression. It was the first time in years Isaiah had volunteered to entangle himself in another's troubles, and the familiar walls of his isolation cracked just enough to let in a dangerous ray of possibility. Over the following weeks, Isaiah found himself riding out to the Callahan homestead whenever his smithy work allowed. The small cabin stood in a picturesque valley with a creek running along its eastern edge, valuable land indeed. Under Hope's direction, they repaired the roof, reinforced the barn, and prepared for winter. Young William, initially shy, gradually warmed to Isaiah's presence. The boy followed him about, asking endless questions about horseshoes and metalworking. One evening, as Isaiah demonstrated how to bank a fire properly, William solemnly announced, "Papa used to do it different. But your way's good too." The simple statement pierced Isaiah's defenses more effectively than any bullet. Here was the ghost of the boy's father, present in every comparison, yet William was allowing Isaiah into his world. Hope, watching from the doorway, met Isaiah's eyes. He hasn't spoken of James since. She didn't finish, but moved to the crude table to serve the stew she'd prepared. During these shared meals, Isaiah learned of Hope's life before the frontier, daughter of a Boston merchant who'd scandalized her family by marrying a man with Western dreams. She spoke of James Callahan with respect and fondness, but without the devastating grief Isaiah had expected. "We were partners more than sweethearts," she admitted one evening after William was asleep. "James was kind and had grand visions, but," she traced patterns on the wooden table with her finger, "we married young, more from practical necessity than passion." Isaiah found himself sharing more than he'd intended, stories of his parents, the wagon train, his apprenticeship to a blacksmith in St. Louis before striking out for the territories. With each exchange, the rigid boundaries he'd maintained for years grew more permeable. As the first snow dusted the valley, Hope proved her determination was not mere words. She worked alongside Isaiah, learning to chop wood, repair fences, and tend the animals with a quiet competence that impressed him. Her chestnut hair would escape its pins as she worked, framing her face with wild tendrils that Isaiah found increasingly distracting. When Becker's men returned, they found not a vulnerable widow, but Isaiah's rifle and Hope's shotgun waiting. The men retreated, but their threats lingered in the air like the coming winter. "You've made an enemy," Hope said that evening, her face troubled in the firelight. "You don't have to stay entangled in our problems." Isaiah looked at her, really looked, and saw not just beauty, but strength, intelligence, and a future that suddenly seemed to hold possibilities beyond solitary survival. "I'm exactly where I should be," he replied, the words feeling like truth after years of hiding from connection. December brought heavy snow and the arrival of a circuit judge to Eagles Crossing. The land dispute would finally have its hearing. The night before the trial, as Isaiah prepared to leave the homestead for his smithy, Hope stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, her brown eyes reflecting the firelight, "you've given William and me something precious. You've helped us believe in goodness again." The warmth of her touch traveled through him like wildfire. Before he could respond, a shot rang out from the darkness, shattering the window beside them. Isaiah pulled Hope to the floor as more bullets splintered the door. "Take William through the back," he ordered, grabbing his rifle. "Get to the root cellar." As Hope scrambled to collect her terrified son, Isaiah provided covering fire. When silence fell, he found them huddled in the earthen cellar, William clutching his mother with wide, fearful eyes. "They're trying to scare you away before the hearing," Isaiah said grimly, checking that they were unharmed. Hope's face in the lantern light showed not fear, but resolve. "They don't understand what it means to fight for your child's future. I won't run." In that moment, as William's frightened whimpers subsided against his mother's shoulder, Isaiah recognized the false belief that had governed his years of isolation. The frontier wasn't about surviving alone. It was about finding people worth fighting alongside. The very connection he'd avoided was what gave Hope her remarkable strength. The hearing the next day became the talk of Eagles Crossing for years afterward. Becker arrived with his lawyer and hired guns, confident in his intimidation. Hope stood with only Isaiah, her sister Martha, and the truth of her claim. But when Judge Harmon called for witnesses, the door opened to reveal Walter Simmons from the land office, followed by 3 neighboring homesteaders. Each testified to James Callahan's improvements to the land and Becker's threats. Becker, red-faced with fury, shouted accusations of conspiracy. The judge banged his gavel. "The deed stands. The property belongs to Mrs. Hope Callahan by right of her husband's claim and her continued residence." Outside the courthouse, Becker cornered Isaiah. "You've made a grave mistake, Blacksmith. Your shop looks mighty flammable." Before Isaiah could respond, Hope stepped between them, her 5'5" frame somehow towering with righteous anger. "Threaten him again, Mr. Becker, and I'll have the sheriff investigate who shot at my home with my child inside. I believe that's attempted murder in any territory." As Becker stormed away, Isaiah stared at Hope in amazement. This woman, who had entered his life in desperate flight, now stood as his defender. Something fundamental shifted in his understanding of strength and weakness. The revelation came crashing down that night, when Isaiah returned to find his smithy ablaze. The town formed a bucket brigade, but the workshop was destroyed, years of tools and work reduced to ash and twisted metal. In the smoking ruins, Isaiah felt strangely hollow. He had feared attachment because loss hurt too much, yet here was loss anyway. Not of people, but of the very independence he'd sacrificed everything to maintain. Hope found him there at dawn, surveying the destruction. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "This happened because of us." Isaiah turned to her, seeing the guilt in her eyes. "No, it happened because I was afraid for too long. I built this place thinking it would protect me from pain." He gestured at the charred beams. "But it didn't protect me from loneliness." Hope stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold morning air. "What will you do now?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning beyond the immediate future. Isaiah looked at her, this young widow who had faced loss and fear yet remained open to possibility, and saw everything he had denied himself. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in years, I don't have a plan." Hope studied him for a long moment, then offered quietly, "My land has good clay soil near the creek. It would make fine bricks for a new forge." She hesitated. "William asks for you every morning." The implications of her words washed over Isaiah like spring rain after drought. Before he could respond, riders appeared at the edge of town, Becker and 6 men, armed and grim. "Get behind me," Isaiah ordered, reaching for the pistol at his hip. But Hope didn't move. "No, we face this together or not at all." The townsfolk emerged from their homes and businesses as Becker's party approached. The cattle rancher looked surprised to find not a despondent blacksmith, but a community standing firm. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, rifle ready. "This has gone far enough, Becker. Burning a man's livelihood crosses the line." "You can't prove I did anything," Becker sneered. "Maybe not," came a voice from the crowd. Walter Simmons, the land clerk. "But I've telegraphed the territorial governor about your pattern of threats and property destruction. There's a marshal on his way to investigate." Becker's face contorted with rage. His hand moved toward his gun, but Isaiah was faster. In one smooth motion, he drew and fired a warning shot that kicked up dust at Becker's horse's feet. "The next one won't miss," Isaiah stated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. For a tense moment, violence hung in the air like storm clouds. Then Becker slowly raised his hands. "This territory's getting too civilized anyway," he spat. "Keep your worthless land and your woman, Blacksmith. I'm moving my operation to Wyoming." As Becker and his men retreated, the tension broke. Townspeople surrounded Isaiah with offers of help rebuilding. Through the crowd, his eyes found hopes, and in them he saw not just relief but a future he'd never dared envision, a home filled with purpose and connection. Later, as they walked along the creek on Hope's land, William ran ahead, chasing grasshoppers in the tall grass. Isaiah stopped at a flat clearing overlooking the water. "Here," he said. "The forge could go here, close enough to the house, but far enough that the noise and smoke won't disturb you." Hope looked up at him, the setting sun gilding her chestnut hair with fire. "Is that what you want? To rebuild here?" Isaiah took a deep breath. "What I want is to stop running from connection. What I want is to build something that will outlast me." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "What I want is you and William, if you'll have me." Hope's fingers tightened around his. "William already thinks you hang the moon. And I." Her voice softened. "I've been afraid too. Afraid to admit I was falling in love with you when James has been gone less than a year." "Love grows where it's needed," Isaiah said, the words feeling right despite their unfamiliarity on his tongue. "Not when it's convenient." Hope's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then yes, Isaiah Jackson, we'll have you." By spring, a new forge rose beside a creek on the Callahan-Jackson homestead. The town turned out for a wedding where William proudly carried the rings, and Martha Crawford wept happy tears for her sister's second chance. Isaiah no longer worked alone. Hope kept the books with merchant-daughter precision, and William, now 5, solemnly pumped the bellows under careful supervision. In the evenings, they sat on their porch watching fireflies rise from the meadow while Hope's belly swelled with the promise of new life. "I was wrong about the frontier," Isaiah told his wife one summer evening as William slept against his shoulder. "It's not about how much you can endure alone. It's about finding people worth enduring it with." Hope smiled, taking his calloused hand in hers. "You saved us from bandits that day, but I think perhaps we saved each other from something worse. The belief that we weren't meant for happiness." Above them, stars emerged in the vast Montana sky, no longer symbols of cold isolation, but witnesses to a truth Isaiah had finally embraced, that a family forged through frontier hardship and love was stronger than any metal he would ever shape. In Hope's eyes, he had found not just a wife, but a future worth building, hammer stroke by hammer stroke, day by day, together.